step on? Sorry. Thank you, Chair Porterfield. Thank you so much for having us here today. I hope you'll forgive my voice. I'm recovering from some laryngitis. So I'm grateful to have the folks next to me for their expertise and also their voices. I'm joined today by Angie Hubbard, who's Director of Housing within the Planning Department, and George Rooker, who leads our operations team. I want to acknowledge Todd Ogle-Cheney, Randy Semrick, and Rochelle Albright, who all do exceptional work for the planning department. And so I'm just going to break our presentation. Can you go back, George, into two, are you leading? You're leading the ship. Okay. Into two sections. The first are accomplishments in FY24. And then I wanted to give a particular focus to the housing team who has undertaken such important work on behalf of the city. Now it doesn't want to go. So this is a hard to read slide, obviously, but I wanted to acknowledge the growth and evolution of the planning department and say that that has happened through the support of mayor's office, this administration, the previous one, and also this body. So we've spent the last 7 or so years on a project to evolve the department from one that is primarily regulatory in nature, reviewing individual projects, to one that can really provide the full complement of planning services for a city of this size. I think the hallmark of a healthy planning department and a healthy planning context is being able to plan at every scale. So, certainly we delivered Nashville Next, which is an award-winning plan and a very high-level strategic vision for our city. And then you see Lisa Milligan every several weeks talking about individual projects that through your stewardship are reviewed and approved at this level. And we felt like it was really important to build out the sections that go from major plan to implementation. That is absolutely a critical point. And so we've built out a long-range planning section that now has connections to expert advice, architecture, economics, land planning, engineering, anything that our department needs to supplement our work. And again, that is through the support of this body. And then several years ago, Angie Hubbard seeded the housing team and has been roaring ever since. And so this is a dynamic and growing department. I just want to acknowledge we're still growing. We are still sort of creating the kind of platform that we think is right for a city, but we're partnering with you and the administration to make sure that that's done well. So I want to just talk very briefly about some of the key things that we focused on in 24. We believe that urban design quality needs to be one of the central aspects of our work, and it's not just building. It's sustainability, it's environmental design quality. One of the coolest and most wonderful things about our community is the natural features that both frame our neighborhoods and our downtown, serve as great design, but also for the health of our city from a resiliency perspective. And so we've created a section that really focuses on that. It's more holistic, again, than just looking site by site. Want to acknowledge Director Mendez here today and his good partnership with us on the East Bank team and his work with you in this body to ensure that we could take the East Bank vision and move it towards implementation. Again, our focus is how do you get from the great concept plan and the lines on the map to deliver? Because that is what the expectation is, I think, for Nashvillians. And we did it under the stewardship of Mr. Mendez. Our land development team, who sits with you every several weeks, you know Lisa Milligan. They reviewed 1,600 building permits. We have a customer service team that does incredibly hard and important work. It serves as our face at the front counter. And then, as I mentioned previously, we have a program management team that's basically been able to build out the capacity between like that strategic plan level and implementation. So we no longer want to deliver a plan that's at such a high level that the departments don't know yet or don't have a pathway to how to implement. And so we are working closer in detail in thinking about those things. That work includes a global mall study, 88 Hermitage, and the Edge Hill Neighborhood Plan. And so we've been working through what's called an IDIQ program, which just basically means access to expert services if there are instances when the department's own expertise needs to be nurtured or strengthened. Human Resources, which works under George Rooker, has hired 17 new staff to make sure that we're meeting that mandate. And the other thing I would say is just a shout out is that when you grow as a department, ensuring that we deliver really good quality control on what we are pursuing in the department is critical. And that looks different when you go from a largely regulatory section to one that is doing a different kind of planning work. And George has really focused on ensuring that we have high quality measures in place to ensure the guardrails are in place. And so I'm grateful to him. And then we have a communications team led by Rochelle, and she does a lot of coordination work with other departments and also the mayor's office to ensure that we're not working in a silo and we communicate to Nashvillians and to you. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Angie Hubbard, who's going to focus on the housing section.
Thank you, Lucy. And good afternoon. It's great to be here again. We were here a couple of months ago with an Affordable Housing Educational 201. So thank you for having us and always entertaining housing conversations. So we're going to start by just highlighting some of our FY24 on the screen are just some graphics from our dashboard. So if you haven't been to our website, and thank you for Council Lady Allen, for years in prior capacities, we've talked about a housing scorecard or dashboard. There is now an ordinance that requires us to have this dashboard and update it quarterly. This is just a snippet of it. And this is a lot of information that can be useful for you all because one of the tabs is the state of housing in the city. And it really shows the increase in housing cost, our area median income, just some general information, as well as the overall unduplicated unit count that we're putting into production. There's a specific Barnes Fund tab where you can see the performance of the funds that you are investing in affordable housing, and then some more information about other Metro tools, the low-income housing tax credit, payment in lieu of tax program, our mixed income pilot, and other tools. So that's really one of the really big things we've been focused on, as well as getting more and more units funded and into production. When we did the Affordable Housing Task Force report in 2021, we were averaging about 1,300 homes funded for preservation or creation in the pipeline every year. We're now up to 3,500, and that's unduplicated. And that's a mixture of the Barnes Fund, low-income housing tax credits, and other tools that we have. We need to be at 5,000 to meet the goal of the Affordable Housing Task Force, the need that we need 52,000 units in 10 years. So we're making a lot of progress. We are trying not to leave any other dollars on the table and going now proactively for HUD grants. We were before you in the fall to submit an application to HUD for the Pro Housing Grant. We were supposed to have heard in January. We're still waiting. But anyway, we are working on every opportunity that we can to find additional resources to support affordable housing. I do want to add, we've grown our staff. We started with 3 people, and we're now about to hire our 10th person. We have a full-time compliance monitor for the Barnes Fund, so we're super excited to be able to have that diligence and stewardship of the fund. And I do want to call specific attention to the Housing Trust Fund. We celebrated 10 years of the fund this year. I want to draw attention. We've invested almost, as the city, over $110 million in affordable housing projects. And what I mean when I say affordable, these are income restricted for home ownership it's for people at 80% of the area median income or below. The rental is at 60%. These are deed restricted now for 30 years. It started out at 20 years. We're now at 30 years. So this is longer term affordability. We're leveraging over $1 billion in other funds. That's a $9 for every $1 of Metro funds invested. I would love to have that kind of return on some of my investments. So this is, so thank you for your continued investment in the trust fund. We keep expanding to the nonprofits that we partner with to get a whole range of diverse organizations that serve all different populations, because we need everyone with stable and secure housing. So upcoming work, we will be launching soon the Catalyst Fund. You've heard us talk about that. We are also launching the Unified Housing Strategy. You've heard us talk about that when we were here. We now are officially under contract with HR&A Advisors. They've been here this week, kicking off some meetings. We'll be publishing soon the broad community engagement and stakeholder opportunity list. We'll be looking to you and reaching out on how we can engage with your constituents. We want everyone at the table to hear their housing journeys to inform our strategy. Needs to be informed by the people that need housing the most. Often they don't come to the table, and we need your help to bring them there. The other parts are, again, to increase our pipeline to have 5,000 homes funded annually. We want to really increase the awareness around housing needs and opportunities. There's still so much misinformation. Terms are thrown around loosely. How can we get people to really understand what our need is? So you'll be seeing us do more and more educational opportunities. We'll be using the Unified Housing Strategy to help us with that as well. And then being part of planning and able to collaborate on some interdisciplinary, interdepartmental work, like being part of the East Bank conversation and all the other big planning efforts. It's really exciting to just work together on those collaborative efforts. Next slide. So now I'm going to talk about probably the hottest question that I get. What are we doing about Metro land for housing? So first, I want to really talk about, there's two different types of properties. I'm going to start with tax delinquent properties, because that's the one that the code gives the housing division the opportunity to review before they're made available for sale. So after the redemption period, so when someone has a tax delinquent property, they're held until the redemption period ends, and then the Office of Public Property sends us a list. We evaluate it for a number of things to determine whether or not it's feasible and needs to have the minimum lot size requirements, frontage, not have any physical constraints, really be buildable. If it's not, we tell the Office of Property we don't need it, we can't use it for housing, they sell it. Thanks to legislation that was passed a few years ago, those proceeds now come to the Barnes Fund. If they are buildable, we make them available in a funding round to nonprofits. They're granted to them. And we've awarded over 100 properties to date. We do have an issue with activating those in an expeditious manner because clouded title often accompanies tax delinquent properties. So that, thanks to funding last year, the position that we're in the process of filling is to stand up a land bank, to use some state authority to be able to expedite that title clearing. And thankfully, the state legislature just added some more tools to the land bank authority to even speed that process up. So we're looking forward to getting that going and getting those properties online. And then the next is the larger portfolio properties. And these are the ones I think everybody's talking about when they're asking, what are you doing with Metro properties? So I just wanted to walk through quickly what this process looks just from our side of it. Is the properties are typically held by different departments, parks, schools, and we've got a slide to show you what that breakdown looks like. So if they're in use, they're in use by a department for some reason, purpose. If they're vacant or unutilized and the department decides to surplus them, like any other department, we get the opportunity to look at them to see if we can use them for housing. We look to see if they're buildable, again, same criteria, if they're appropriate. And one of the things I want to highlight here is, I think you all have heard about the Ernst & Young study that General Services did to look at space planning. But one of the things they did during that process was share with us a list of potential properties that could be used for housing. We got a list of about 324 of that. About 270 are owned by the airport. So that's not going to be appropriate for us to put housing, right? So that would be taking that off the table. And then, of course, just moving through the whole process, then it gets, if it needs to be rezoned. This lists some of the properties we're looking at. I'm going to talk about those in depth a little bit more. So it's not just super easy to look at property and say, oh, we don't have a structure on it. Let's see if we can use it for housing. It may be in some strategic position for the city, protecting a valuable asset like our water infrastructure. A lot of our properties deed restricted FEMA buyouts. So there's some challenges there. Another challenge is how the property was acquired. It could be donated for an educational purpose or an open and green space purpose. So if they're not going to be used for that, it may revert back to the heirs. So there's a lot of deep work that goes into this. And the financing mechanism too, depending on how they were acquired, that financing mechanism might say it must be used for this purpose for this period of time. So there's a lot of complications to walk through every single piece of property that Metro owns. So what we do is when we have the opportunity, when someone is surplusing property, that's when we look at it as well as any other department on their need. And we do have, or graphic, is there one more? Tap it. Oh, no, go back, George, please. No, back to the slide you were on with the map. And then hit it one more time to see if the circle shows up. There we go. Okay, this is actually what our portfolio looks like. Everybody's favorite person in planning, no offense, Lucy, Greg Claxton, pulled this together from our GIS. And this is also what public property relies on. This is a map of where our properties are, but this is how they're held. The green of about 74% is in the parks portfolio. Schools is in the orange, and then you can see how that looks. That QR code there, if you want to scan it or just go to our website, I've prepared a memo that describes how we've been looking at property for housing. And it walks you through this. It talks about what we're currently looking at, but we did want to share with you just how complicated this is, how things are held. And then next slide, George. So with that, these are some active things that we're working on. Yeah, I'm going to end with the opportunities. We talked about some challenges. Let's talk about the opportunities. So on this are just some of the Metro public property that we're looking at for various purposes. Water, last year, surplus 2 properties. We're making those available for the Housing Trust Fund. Those will definitely be used for housing. Again, moving across the tax delinquent properties, what are buildable will be used for housing. Second and Gay, there's a lot of opportunities for co-location of housing and other Metro uses. That's where the Strobel Center is being built. But then there are some, it's under evaluation for other potential housing along with some other uses. Moving down, we know that East Bank is going to have affordable housing. Thank you, Director Mendez. Thank you to everyone that included affordable housing. We know that Global Mall will include some housing aspect. We are finishing up our 88 Hermitage that will have an affordable housing component. And then the active properties that are under evaluation with community input, the Brick Church Pike property in Chair Gamble's district, some school property out in Councilmember Wiener's district, and then Inglewood Library, Councilmember Benedict specifically asked us to look at that for feasibility for a library and housing. So these are also showing us opportunities for public-private partnerships and co-location. So we're super excited about getting able to explore some new opportunities around housing and other uses, because there are community assets that some areas need as well as, or in addition to, or other than housing. So we have to be mindful of those things. So Lucy, did I miss anything in this conversation? Okay. So that's where we have been and what we're working on with property and all of our housing work.
How long have you been leading this team?
Since January 2022.
So, I mean, that's That's a lot of work for it's not a brand new team. There were several, as y'all know, there were several excellent housing team members as part of the mayor's office previously. So we've always had a housing team, but this is the first sort of division within a department. And I think they've accomplished an extraordinary amount of work. So
Thank you.
so with that, I think that concludes our presentation. George is here to answer any budget or operation-specific questions. But again, we just thank you for your support and partnership and all of those good things. So with that, I conclude my presentation.
Thank you so much. We appreciate this. And we will start with our Planning and Zoning Committee Chair, Chair Gamble, if she has anything. And then we will go to Councilmember Bradford is who I saw next. And then did I see your hand, Councilmember Allen? I have you next, followed by Councilmember Cash, followed by Councilmember Quinn Evans Siegel. That's all I see for now. I do have one quick question before we jump too far into this because I didn't get to catch that QR code. Is this the link on your website that says Metro Property for Affordable Housing?
Yes.
Okay. And is there a link to the actual results of the study that was done, the Ernest and Young study?
Yes, it is on General Services website under Design and Relocation Services. It's called the Renew Master Plan.
The Renew Master Plan. And does that have the specific addresses of properties that are available?
That does not. That is the result of the, and again, this was General Services study. They did a broad analysis to come up with their space planning. That's hard to say, really. Space planning needs for Metro. It does not have the specific addresses of all of the properties that they utilize. I don't believe. When I looked at it earlier today, it did not.
Let me suggest we get with, because that portion of the work was under General Services. So let me touch base with General Services Chair, and if it's all right, we can follow up by separate email and link you with the staff there that oversaw that work.
Yes, that will be very appreciated. I know that there have been multiple requests from some different departments about us getting a report of all available land. So I just wanted to make sure that I was not missing that in this report. So thank you so much. And again, thank you for all the work that y'all are doing. We appreciate everything that y'all are doing so much. And Chair Gamble, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you again, as Madam Chair, Budget Chair said, thank you for all the work that you all are doing and shoring up the staff in order to address particularly our affordable housing needs. I do have a question. It looks like in your questionnaire that you all had asked for an adjustment of about $2.29 million for positions, additional positions, salary adjustments, a pattern book, public engagement, and it includes about 1.1 million for the housing infrastructure study that our council approved a few months ago, requesting as we're looking at addressing affordable housing crisis in the city. That was not funded in the budget. Do you have a plan for funding those needs? And if not, or if you do, is there a shortage or gap that needs to be filled? And if so, what is that number?
I think it would be helpful, George, to focus specifically on the housing and infrastructure piece, which I know is important to this body, and then we can answer any follow-up questions.
Yes, well,
Mr. Pratt, you're recognized.
Hi, Aaron Pratt, Budget Officer. That the housing infrastructure study is funded in the budget. It's actually funded as part of the surplus allocation as conferred January 1st after the act was completed at the amount of $2.4 million.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And are there any other adjustments, I guess, that you all had to make as far as the salaries and positions and the pattern book that might need to be addressed? But thank you to the Mayor's Office Finance Department on clearing that up. So it's actually 2.1 million for the housing infrastructure study. Was that correct?
It's 2.4 million.
2.4. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Chair Gamble.
He was getting ready to ask my question
my-
about
I'm
the other
so
services.
sorry.
I was just going to mention that the $2.4 million is for the total cost of the study from all departments. It's been appropriated proposed to be appropriated to the planning department. And as was mentioned earlier, this is coming from surplus fund balance, which means we won't get the money until sometime after the first of the year, most likely. We are prepared to pick up the cost of that because obviously the study needs to start since it's due by March, and we're going to be able to pick up the upfront cost of that study through our regular budget and then replenish those funds after the first of the year.
I would say because of that balance that we're working on, things like the pattern book, which I think are a great idea and we supported, it may be that those are delivered later. We're still trying to evaluate how to balance the timing of the study, but also the timing of the buckets. And so we will be working with you and the commission to make sure that as we're working those things through and processing that, everybody is sort of on the same page about what we will deliver and when. But again, like the pattern book may come a little bit later as a result.
Thank you, Chair Gamble. Next, we have Councilmember Bradford. You're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This question kind of goes back to this presentation about city-owned property for housing. We recently just opened a brand-new high school in Bellevue to replace our crumbling school, Hillwood. Has there been conversations about what to do with that property?
So what we've really been focused on is ensuring that we formalize the process for how we work through publicly owned land and thinking that through, as opposed to sort of very specific projects, because the expertise and the various authorities for delivering those types of projects rest in different departments. And so it's my understanding that the mayor has filed 2 executive orders late this afternoon that clarify the roles and responsibilities of 2 departments that would be involved in planning and thinking about surplus properties and how we can and should be working with schools and other entities to make sure that we're thinking that through. And so I hope through those 2 EOs, and I'll make sure that I share a link with Margaret Darby. That was a bit hot off the presses as I got up here. So you all have that. I think what that'll do is give you a picture into who's going to be responsible, how that structure is going to occur and what those tasks look like. So I think it'll be very helpful. I don't have an answer to that specific question, but I think you can look at those and figure out how we're going to work through those as a metro.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so very much, Councilmember Bradford. Councilmember Allen, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one more question to follow up on the things that were in the list that weren't funded. There was also $80,000 for the housing dashboard, which I'm so excited about. I think that was just maintenance. Does that mean it won't be maintained, or if that funding isn't there?
We have a number of issues that we're going to have to try to manage through this year, obviously, in a flat budget year. We are going to try to make sure that all of these needs are met in some form or fashion. We may have to do a little juggling of resources to make all those things happen, but we feel like at the current funding level, if there aren't any further reductions, we can meet all those needs.
With no further reductions. Okay.
Right.
I appreciate that effort.
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. Next, we have Councilmember Cash. You're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have budget-specific questions, but I did want to say that property utilization presentation was like great. It's like questions that I've had and haven't asked enough, and some like answers that I didn't know that I had questions for. But I'm glad that I do. Just real quick, I don't want to get too deep into this and happy to have a follow-up conversation. I know that I have, and they've come up in the last couple of weeks as some issues. I know I have, like, within a half a mile of me, at least 6 vacant properties, and I don't mean just like it's been vacant for a year. I mean, it's been vacant. I got some that have been vacant for 30 years, and I got raccoons living in them, but we want some houses for humans. So, and I know that that's very different from tax delinquent properties. They're paying their taxes, they're getting the grass cut and stuff. But do we have any strategies or tools, or is this something that's been discussed, like all these vacant properties and like encouraging or prodding property owners who have just kind of literally abandoned the property to, hey, let's do something with this?
Unfortunately, if there's not a code violation or a way that Metro can really step in with some kind of regulatory mechanism, but one of the things that we are working on is creating funding sources so to make it nimble for affordable housing developers to go out and acquire property, not just big property for large multifamily, but we've got a lot of nonprofits that are in that specific space of acquiring single-family homes, rehabbing them, and selling them. And that's what we've got some Barnes Fund money for that, but of course that's on funding rounds where we might have to wait till that opens, but the new Catalyst Fund that we're talking about is that nimble short-term capital that could enable that. And so as we bring on the position that we're filling for the land bank, we're also looking for that person to help us scour those opportunities to be able to share those with our partners that are looking to acquire property.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Cash. Councilmember Quinn Evans Siegel, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a couple, I think are probably small questions. On the grants, I know there's some moving around on grants and there's money in surplus for the housing study. I think there are now some federal grants that might be used for that. I know the last thing a department that can't hire more staff and is really busy wants to hear is, are we looking for grants that might help offset that? But that is the question.
For housing programs, we're looking at grants.gov regularly to see what opportunities that we can chase after money. Again, we applied for one in October that was supposed to have been announced in January. It's now May. So not exactly timely in that space, but we are not, as well as through state and other resources too. So it's not just the feds.
And I'll say the subject matter experts in the mayor's office are also doing a great job. Kendra Afkowitz, who leads the sustainability section, I don't want to tell you it's once a month, but it is really frequently sending emails to the departments in her interest area and saying, here's some opportunities. So I think we're getting better at it, but I would say the grants world is a big deal. And so I appreciate the question. And it may be that we need a grants manager at some point, but yeah.
Fair enough. And then I was a little curious, you had some software licenses in here. I know some run through IT, some run through departments, and I just kind of want to clarify what that request was for.
Typically, software requests for enterprise software that's government-wide go through ITS. If it's a department-specific function, we have some Esri software, for example, that we use to model zoning, and those go through the department.
Yeah. Realizing I'm not very good at charades. I see you telling me to do something, but answer.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think I just because it was a modification, I wasn't sure if that was just due to new staffing hires or upgrades in software or
Actually, it's new software for community engagement and some public outreach that we've never had before. So we would like to add some of that. We're going to be able to probably still using some savings that we had for FY '24, be able to purchase some of that software and use it in the future.
Thank you so very much. Do we have any additional questions? All right, seeing none, thank you all so much for the presentation and all of your hard work and thoughtfulness in all the work that you do. We really appreciate you all and look forward to getting that list of available land as soon as possible. So thank you. And with that, we will bring this hearing to a close, and we will now start our last hearing of the evening.